but maybe that's going to open up a gap for a nation like Australia. I'm delighted to say that Australia cricket writer Paul Dennett joins us now. Very good morning to you, Paul. How are you doing?
Great. How are you going?
Yeah, good. Thank you, pal. Very well indeed. I mean, not as well as you are. We've got more Australia action coming up a bit later this morning, but it must be nice to see your Southern Hemisphere rivals, I'm thinking particularly South Africa, struggling so far.
Well, the cruel people amongst us, and I'm not one of them, have said that Australia has lost 3 World Cup games this millennium. South Africa have lost 3 this week. But I'm certainly not saying that. I think it's a bit sad actually that they're 65 to 1 to win the tournament. They're perennially one of the favourites. The tournament's barely begun and they're almost out the back door.
Yeah, amazing to see them at this point. And don't get me wrong, India was always going to be a test, but when they put themselves behind the 8 ball in the way that they have already, you go into that game like that with that extra pressure.
Yeah, and also missing Ngidi, who's a fine fast bowler, and Dale Steyn having now been ruled out for the entire tournament. There was a point in the game last night where Rabada was bowling amazingly well to India on a pitch that had something in it. If they'd had at the other end a real class bowler, then the result could have been different. But you keep on sort of bleeding players, and there's only so much you can do.
I mean, Rohit Sharma was in fine form, but can we talk about that? Can we just talk about that catch, the Virat Kohli out? Because, that not quite Ben Stokes level, but that was some fine keeping.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the standard of fielding in this tournament is already setting new benchmarks. But as is always the case, some of the drops that have taken place, notably with Jason Roy for England the other day.
Yeah, really glad you mentioned that nice and early.
Well, look, I'm a bit nervous about this upcoming game between Australia and the West Indies. So if Australia gets beaten, then I'll be certainly put in my place, because I think I'm not saying that West Indies are going to be favourites, but as I said, I'm a bit worried about this game.
Well, where are the worry points for you? It's Trent Bridge today. It looks like it's going to be an unchanged Australian side for this one. What are those kind of pressure points, do you think, for Australia?
Well, I think it's more to do with the West Indies. I think that they are close to being back to not their best as they were in the 70s and 80s. I think that it's unrealistic to expect them to ever get maybe to that level. But with Andre Russell, he's a player that, if you haven't seen him play, he makes Viv Richards look like Jeff Boycott. He is unbelievable. And then, he overshadows people like Gale and Hetmeyer and Holder. They've just got power hitters the whole way through their lineup, but they can bat as well. They're not just sloggers, they are quite classy players. Australia have said they intend to bowl a lot of bouncers to them. And that might work, but it could also spectacularly fail. And, a couple of top-edge sixes to get them going. And, they really have any sort of total capability within them.
Do you think they bat deep enough, though, if you take a couple of those early wickets?
Yeah, it's a good question, because even a few years ago I would have said no, that you get a couple of key wickets out and they're liable to collapse. But they actually bat pretty deep now, even right down to Cottrell, who comes out around about number 10. And they can all handle the bat. And they've got Carlos Brathwaite, who's going to possibly bat at number 8. And again, not to mention England, but he's the guy that hit 4 sixes to win the World's T20 a few years ago off Ben Stokes. So the thing about them is that they are very unpredictable. Australia are kind of a hard-nosed, polished, professional side. Huge amounts of money at our disposal. We've got 2 full-time leg spinners just in the camp from India practicing against Australians all the time. We've got the resources to do that sort of thing. So you know what you're going to get from Australia. West Indies, at their worst, Australia could go out there and thrash them. But at their best, it could be a very different story.
Now, we need to see how England bounce back from that performance in midweek. I think Bangladesh, actually, for me, from an England perspective, are a potential banana skin, because I think they've looked really good. And we talk about batting deep, I think they've done that. I think they've got a decent attack as well. But if England don't react well, it could blow this entire World Cup open, and Australia will probably fancy themselves if that happens.
Yeah, I think that England, you would expect them to beat Bangladesh. It's a dangerous word, expect.
Yeah, Paul, you're not an English cricket fan. You never expect.
Exactly. And Bangladesh, they played very the West Indies in Ireland in the warm-up games. They were beating them there. They've just beaten the last semi-finalist. Just a few hours ago, they almost beat the runners-up from the last World Cup. Knocked England out of the last World Cup as well. So it's a banana skin game for England. Bangladesh, they shouldn't be underestimated. They are an outside chance of making the semi-finals. Fully expect England to go out there and win comprehensively, but I fully expected England to do that to Pakistan as well.
We'll keep our fingers firmly crossed, Paul. Where are you watching the game tomorrow? Have you got big plans for it?
No, I think that with Sydney's a bit of a closed city these days. They lock the pubs pretty early. It's going to be one of these games I think I'm going to be pretty boring and watch it at home. But if things change, I'd certainly love to watch it out in the city with a few mates, but probably doing the boring thing at this stage. Shocking. Well, Paul, thank you so much for your time. I would say we keep our fingers crossed for you, but if there's one thing we enjoy more than an English win, it's an Australian loss. So fingers crossed that they slog you all over the place tomorrow. Thank you very much. Have a good one. Thank you, sir. Paul Dennett joining us, latest on the Cricket World Cup.